are you looking forward to 1975? Why should anyone have had any special expectations regarding this year 1975? And why should we still be interested? After all, that was almost 50 years ago in the past. It has something to do with these two Bible texts. Here in Luke 16:10, NIV, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. And Psalm 5:7 NLT, you will destroy those who tell lies. The Lord detests murderers and deceivers. We will see that the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, by their current statements upon the subject in 1975, have proven to be both unreliable and must even be called liars and deceivers. According to Luke 16:10, therefore, they should not be trusted, even in major matters. And according to Psalm 5:7, they are even an abomination of Yahweh. I know these are strong words, but the evidence will follow. When Anthony Morris III was still part of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, he completely distorted the facts of events prior to 1975 on JW Broadcasting in 2022. And in the process, he made fun of some faithful older brothers of that time. For me, this also has a personal component. My maternal grandparents were already Bible students in the early 1920s. They themselves witnessed the predictions of the president of the Watchtower organization, J.F. Rutherford, for the year 1925, which did not come true. Millions now living will never die. And you see here from the Watchtower article that this is really true, but this was proclaimed. This was proclaimed not only by Rutherford for years, but by the Bible students worldwide. But this prediction did not come true. But it was also never openly admitted and is transfigured until today. And these are now from the Watchtower 2022 October and 2020 October. When expectations are announced again, this time for the year 1975, my grandfather said to my grandmother, we have seen that in 1925 the hopes were not fulfilled. And we said that we want to serve Jehovah forever. This is what we are going to do now. For this reasonable attitude, however, he got quite a beating from his fellow elders. You can't say that. Well, these were just ordinary publishers in the congregation. And many publishers had simply got carried away with false expectations. Many publishers had simply got carried away with false expectation. This narrative has been spread by the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses for a long time. But was it really only some publishers who expected too much in 1975? Let us now examine this one on basis of the publications of the governing body. In 1968, the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses posed the above question to all publishers and people worldwide in the Watchtower. Why are you looking forward to 1975? From the Watchtower 1968, August 15th, page 494 in English. In the English edition, the question is, why are you looking forward to 1975? The German language article, however, had a modified theme. What do you expect from 1975? So, what do we expect from 1975? Well, what was the expectation of the governing body? Let's cite what we can read there. Are we to assume from this study that the Battle of Armageddon will be all over by the autumn of 1975? And the long-looked 4,000-year reign of Christ will be... a long-looked 4,000-year reign of Christ will begin again by then? Possibly. But we wait to see how closely the 7,000-year period of man's existence coincides with the Sabbath-like 1,000-year reign of Christ. If these two periods run parallel with each other as to the calendar year, it will not be by mere chance or accident, but will be according to Jehovah's loving and timely purposes. That was the statement. And in paragraph 30, in paragraph 35, we would read, one thing is absolutely certain. Bible chronology reinforced with fulfilled Bible prophecy shows that 6,000 years of man's existence will soon be up. Yes, within this generation. Within this generation. This is therefore no time to be indifferent and complacent. This is not the time to be toying with the words of Jesus, that concerning that day and hour nobody knows, neither the angels or of the heavens nor the Son, but only the Father. To the contrary, it is a time when one should be keenly aware that the end of this system of things is rapidly coming to its violent end. Make no mistake, it is sufficient that the Father himself knows both the day and hour. However, this was just only one article of many. At the end of this article, this video, and the text which I linked, I will list some more. The list is with German publications, but it's easy to find the corresponding English ones, and many can also be found in English, gwfacts.com, or in Raymond Franz's book, The Conflict of Conscience, and James Penton's book, End Times Without End. Okay, but the hype really started and began with this book in 1966. So you see on the left, that's the English version, Life Everlasting in the Freedom of the Sons of God. And right is the German version, actually the copy which was studied by my mother, my late mother. It was this table here, and right is the copy of the English version, and links is the photograph of the German version, with a calculation leading to the year 1975, as well as some statements about in the text that caused enthusiasm already at the 1967 Congress after its publication. And you can have a look at more details there. It's quite interesting what you can find all there. For example, and I just cite some, that the conquest of Jerusalem in 607 BCE did not take place has already been sufficiently proven, but it's mentioned there. Interestingly, at around 49 AD, there is no mention of the governing body in Jerusalem. No wonder it did not exist among Jehovah's Witnesses for many years after 1966. And there's a separate video about that. It will come also in English. That in 1492 the Pope supposedly died from a blood transfusion somehow seems to have been very important in the divine timetable. There's also the explanation for 1914, October is mentioned. It's interesting, but there is a whole book on that, the Gentile Times Reconsidered, for example, and the addendum, the Times of the Gentiles in Luke 21:24. Unfortunately, 1925 is not mentioned, when for about 6 years before that it was preached that millions now living will never die. But instead the topic of blood transfusion is mentioned in 1918. And, interesting, satellites and astronauts in 1957 and 1964. And maybe you remember, there was some articles about this and signs and moons and moon and stars. But let's go back to 1975. The expectations were fueled throughout the following years and until 1975. And there are many quotes, and if you like, you can find words from circuit overseers and others, audio recordings also in English from the US. Here I have one from Germany in German. If you like, you can listen to the striking words of the German branch servant Konrad Franke on this subject, 1975. The talk was in January the 20th, 1968 in Hamburg. However, it must be said that 2 years later, he was no longer the branch leader. It's in German, and I have to note, it sounds somewhat like a talk from the 1930s. Totally different context, but it's not. But it really shows the thought and the ideas Konrad Franke had. And he was absolutely clear that there will be something, there will be the end at 1975. But the real reason why I started this video and the research was something else. But back to the starting point. I was talking about the current presentations, texts, communication about 1975 by the governing body. So what did Anthony Morris, as he was part of the governing body, in the broadcast on JWR in 2022. So if you want to have a look yourself, it's GW Broadcasting February 2022 about the annual meeting 2021 part 2. And that's the same thing in German, with the German official German translations. After about 1 hour and 44 minutes, it's interesting what he has to say about 1975. And I took screen captures of the original video from JW.org, and you see it here. And I had it with German subtitles, and here is now also the English subtitles. So I quote, he said, "So they'd listen, and they appreciated all these older ones." He's talking about his children. "We had a number of them in Rhode Island, longtime servants of Jehovah God. However, from time to time, the statement, they'd be looking at my sons and say," and that was this, "Oh, you'll never graduate in this system." And then he says this, "And maybe it was post 1975, and continues, if you are guilty, God loves you. He forgives you." And then, if you did that back then, you didn't help anybody. And the last statement. "This thing could go on and be ready for it to go to 2020. That were his words at that time. This gives an impression of how wise and farsighted this brother was, this anointed one, who later belonged to the governing body himself. And how wise he was even then, after or around 1975. By the way, in 2023, Brother Morris was removed from the governing body, or at least it's not part of that anymore. For a few days, this event was available, first as breaking news and then as news. And then these news were removed again. As were some other videos of him, for example, and this is Eric Wilson's video discussing it, by condemning disciples, apostates, has the governing body condemned themselves. So this gives you a full picture about Anthony Morrison. But let's go back to the topic he mentioned. He said, if someone said, as some people did to his children, "Oh, you never graduate in the system." He said, "God will forgive you because you said something wrong. You didn't help anybody." So again, it was just some publishers who had wrong expectations. But let's think about, how then did these old brothers come to their wrong attitude? The straightforward answer is this. Awake, 1969, May 22, page 14 and 15. This is the copy. What future for the young? And here's the article. And I will cite some of the statements here. But how fortunate that the online JW library does not contain any pre-1970 editions of Awake, neither German nor English, and that the governing body has instructed the elders in recent years to destroy all the literature in the congregation. But they still exist. You may have a copy, or you can get it online. They are digitized editions. Now, instead of reading from the text here, you can do that yourself. I just cite that here. Young or old, you need to face up to the fact that this system is not going to change its direction. Under Satan's influence, it will continue to deteriorate rapidly in its remaining years. If you are a young person, you also need to face the fact that you will never grow old in this present system of things. Why not? Because all the evidence in fulfillment of Bible prophecy indicates that this corrupt system is due to an end in a few years. Of the generation that observed the beginning of the last days in 1914, Jesus foretold, "This generation will by no means pass away until all these things occur." Therefore, as a young person, you will never fulfill any career at this system offers. If you're in high school and thinking about college education, it means at least 4, perhaps even 6 or 8 more years to graduate into a specialized career. But where will this system of things be by that time? It will be well on the way toward its finish, if not actually gone. So these are all statements in that text. So if you calculate from the year of the publication of this article in 1969, you come to which year with these statements? 1973, 1975, 1977. That's when, I quote, "the system is on its way to its end or even gone." How could these older brothers ever get the idea that Anthony Morris' children will not finish their education? Where, if not from this article from the governing body? So Anthony Morris clearly did not teach his children at that time according to the light and the truth of that time, of the faithful and discreet slave, which were Nathan Knorr and Fred Renz respectively, and later the governing body. Amazing why he was not disfellowshipped at that time, since the doctrine was not even in the 1970s that the end might not come until 2020. Even more amazing, perhaps, is that he then became part of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, although he said the opposite to their teaching. What did the governing body publish after 1975? We can read in Watchtower 1975, 1st of October, page 579. "The end of 6,000 years of man rule approaches. What has been accomplished? Since a new Jewish lunar year began in September 1975, a significant point in human history was reached. What was that? According to the Bible's count of time, mankind then completed 6,000 years of existence of Earth. Yes, the first man, Adam, if he had chosen to remain obedient under God's rulership, would have still been alive and 6,000 years old in September of this year." So somehow they tried to turn the issue around already there, but the uproar was probably too great. What could you read in 1976? Now this is from Watchtower 1976, 15th of July, pages 438 and following, paragraphs 15 to 17. The title of this article was "A Solid Basis for Confidence." 15. "But it is not advisable for us to get our sights on a certain date, neglecting everyday things we would ordinarily care for as Christians, such as things that we and our families really need. We may be forgetting that, when the day comes, it will not change the principle that Christians must at all times take care of all their responsibilities. If anyone has been disappointed through not following this line of thought, he should now concentrate on adjusting his viewpoint, seeing that it was not the word of God that failed or deceived him and brought disappointment, but that his own understanding was based on wrong premises. 16. However, say that you are one who counted heavily on the date, and commendably set your attention more strictly on the urgency of the times and the need of the people to hear. And say you now temporarily feel somewhat disappointed. Are you really the loser? Are you really hurt? We believe you can say that you have gained and profited by taking this conscientious course. Also, you have been enabled to get a really mature, more reasonable viewpoint. 17. The scriptures repeatedly tell us that the end will come as a complete surprise upon the world. Thereafter he said, "Prove yourselves ready, because at an hour that you do not think to be, the Son of Man is coming." These clear statements of Jesus indicate that God's servants will never be given the date of Christ's coming for judgment until it actually takes place. In fact, it will come at what appears to them as an unlike time. How would you have felt about this in 1976? As a kind of apology? Or did the governing body take responsibility? Interestingly, in paragraph 17, using the same text from Matthew, the exact opposite is now said of what was published before 1975. What could one read in the Watchtower article quoted at the beginning? What do you expect from 1975? Back then, you could read, "This is therefore no time to be indifferent and complacent. This is not the time to be toying with the words of Jesus that concerning that day and hour nobody knows. Neither the angels of the heavens nor the Son, but only the Father." Yes, that was in the Watchtower 1968. What do you expect from 1975? But as we saw in 1976, it was argued here with Matthew 24 that no one can know that, and it's clear that no one can know it. That probably led to even more disappointment for many. And so this was written in 1980. In modern times, such eagerness, commendable in itself, has led to attempts at setting dates for the desired liberation from the suffering and troubles that are the lot of persons throughout the earth. With the appearance of the book Life Everlasting in Freedom of the Sons of God, and its comments as to how appropriate it would be for the millennial reign of Christ to parallel the seventh millennium of man's existence, considerable expectations was aroused regarding the year 1975. There were statements made then and thereafter stressing that this was only a possibility. Unfortunately, however, along with such cautionary information, there were other statements published that implied that such realization of hopes by the year was more of a probability than a mere possibility. It is to be regretted that these later statements apparently overshadowed the cautionary ones and contributed to a build-up of the expectation already initiated. Paragraph 6. In its issue of July 15, 1976, the Watchtower, commenting on the inadvisability of setting our sights on a certain date, stated, "If anyone has been disappointed through not following this line of thought, he should now concentrate on adjusting his viewpoint. Seeing that it was not the word of God that failed or deceived him and brought disappointment, but that his own understanding was based on wrong premises." In saying anyone, the Watchtower included all disappointed ones of Jehovah's Witnesses, hence including persons having to do with the publication of the information that contributed to the buildup of hopes centered on that date. That's from the Watchtower 1980, the 15th of March, page 17, choosing the best way of life. And the italics which you saw in the text were in the article. Is that an excuse, or is there not another attempt here to roll the responsibility on the ordinary witness? It is admitted that the Watchtower wrote only about someone in 1976, and then those responsible for the governing bodies place themselves in the ranks of the disappointed Jehovah's Witnesses. Also those who had to do with the publication of the information. And what about those who were responsible for writing and publishing, namely the governing body? Also, paragraph 5 distorts the fact regarding publications. There were far fewer other statements. And if anything was left open, it was only what would happen. This can also be seen if one reads more closely and carefully in the Proclaimer's book what Frederick Franz said at the Congress, at the Assembly. The title was there in the Proclaimer's book, "Say, what does this 1975 mean?" The witnesses had long shared the belief that the 1,000-year reign of Christ would follow after 6,000 years of human history. But when would 6,000 years of human existence end? The book, Life Everlasting in Freedom of the Sons of God, released at the series of district conventions held in 1966, pointed to 1975. Right at the convention, as the brothers examined the contents, the new book triggered much discussion about 1975. At the convention held in Baltimore, Maryland, F.W. Franz gave the concluding talk. He began by saying, "Just before I got on the platform, a young man came to me and said, 'Say, what does this 1975 mean?' Brother Franz then referred to the many questions that had arisen as to whether the material in the new book meant by the 1975 Armageddon would be finished and Saturn would be bound. He stated, in a sense, it could. But we are not saying. All things are possible with God, but we are not saying. And don't any of you be specific in saying anything that is going to happen between now and 1975. But the big point of it all is this, dear friends. Time is short, time is running out, no question about that." In the years following 1966, many of Jehovah's Witnesses acted in harmony with the spirit of that council. However, other statements were published on this subject, and some were likely more definite than advisable. This was acknowledged in the Watchtower of March 15, 1980. But Jehovah's Witnesses were also cautioned to concentrate mainly on doing Jehovah's will and not to be swept up by dates and expectations of an early salvation. So what did the Vice President, not someone, Vice President F.W. Franz really say? That nobody should say something definite about what happens before 1975. Not what happens in 1975, but from now to 1975. But there would be no doubt that the time is short and runs out, his words. Nothing more really needs to be said about that, does it? Apparently it does, because in the next paragraph it is shown that it was the preachers, the publishers, who would not have listened to the admonition. By the way, of the four sources given, two are from 1970 and 1974, 1975, someone must have gotten cold feet. In the same years, however, this was also published. Here, Kingdom Ministry, May 1974. How are you using your life? Yes, since the summer of 1973, there have been new peaks in pioneers every month. Now there are 20,394 regular and special pioneers in the United States, an all-time peak. That is 5,190 more than there were in February 1973, a 34% increase. Does that not warm our hearts? Reports are heard of brothers selling their homes and property and planning to finish out the rest of their days in this old system in the pioneer service. Certainly, this is a fine way to spend the short time remaining before the wicked world's end. That was in the English Kingdom Ministry, May 1974. Interestingly, in the German Kingdom Ministry, the articles were quite often totally different, also this time. But there was a letter from people who are concerned about you. Now, this is the English translation of the German Kingdom Ministry in September 1st, 1974. Jehovah's Witnesses around the world would hold 2 special meetings in September. Why is this special meeting being held? Because the times in which we live make it imperative that you carefully and prayerfully consider your position before Jehovah God. You are probably already aware that for the present godless world in 1915 CE, the last days, as the Bible calls them, have dawned, which will now soon end with the destruction of this world. Consequently, the generation that was an eyewitness to the events of 1914 CE will be the generation that will also experience the Great Tribulation. Nearly 60 years have already passed. The number of those who consciously experienced the year 1914 is decreasing. It is thus clear that the time has come near when Jehovah God will act. Since the Great Tribulation is obviously near, we would urge you not to delay now. That was the German Kingdom Ministry in August 1974, page 4. Finally, a video was shown at a distinct convention a few years ago, where it was also shown how some people at the time probably got the idea that the end would come in 1975. Who has seen only this Congress video or sample video would never have come to the idea what was really published, what we just read. And we only watched a small excerpt of that. But I think that is enough to ask oneself quite openly and honestly the question, should we trust the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, even entrust our lives to them? Let us remember Jesus' words. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Luke 16:10. I also included at the end of the text for this video more detailed quotes of the German publications, so you can automatically translate or find the corresponding English ones. Newer publications, just as have the same publishing date in English, so it's quite easy. But earlier publications to the Watchtower, the English version is quite often 3 months earlier. I think what we saw was already enough to get an answer whether we should trust the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, and to answer the question in the Watchtower in 1968, why are you looking forward to 1975? It was the governing body who gave this message and all the hopes. It was not the publishers who had the idea that there's something there. And as we saw in Awake 1969, there were a clear statement that children will not finish their high school or their graduate in that system after 1969. But Anthony Morris, in the official broadcasting of Jehovah's Witnesses, ignored that, and also in other places. So they are still not honest with their own history. And as I said, as my grandparents were already Bible students in the 1920s early, they saw what happened in 1925 and then in 1975. And looking back, this is also a personal story for me, and that's the reason why I thought I want to really know what was published and have a clear understanding, a good foundation for my decision, what I think about the honesty of the governing body in the past 100 years. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. Bye.